Alright, what's going on everyone? Karlov Manor is nearly upon us, and with it comes 4 new commander decks, and they're all themed around mysteries, murder mysteries, surprise who did it, who knows. The purpose of this video is to give brief overviews of the deck's core strategies. I don't have time to go over all 100 cards in all 4 decks, but I hope to give you just a general idea of what the decks do so you can decide which deck is best for you. And of course I will leave links to the complete deck list in the description below. So let's start with Revenant Recon with Mirko Obsessive Theorist as the commander. It's a 3-mana 1/3 with flying and vigilance that will get a +1/+1 counter whenever you surveil, and at end of turn you get to reanimate a creature with power less than Mirko's with a finality counter. So with this deck, you're looking to surveil creatures into the graveyard and bring them back with your commander. The alternate commander is Marvo Deep Operative, which clashes with opponents when you attack and lets you cast freeze spells when you win the clash. It doesn't have perfect synergy with this deck, but you could definitely do a separate build with it. So anyway, this deck has a bunch of new surveil payoffs: the Unshakable Tail, Charno's Serenade, and Eye of Duskmantle. The first lets you surveil every turn, then it creates clue tokens whenever creatures go into your graveyard from your library, and you can sacrifice clues to return itself to your hand from your graveyard. The spell surveils 3, then reanimates a creature, and then it exiles itself with 3 time counters on it, so it's going to recast every 3 turns. And the Eye will let you play lands and cast spells from your graveyard as long as you've surveilled this turn, which you're hoping to do most turns, and you can pay life for those spells as well, so you can pay mana to surveil, then pay life for the free stuff. 2 other new surveil payoffs are Copy Catchers and Case of the Shifting Visage. The first can copy itself every time you surveil, and then of course the copies can copy themselves and so on and so forth. And the second will copy every non-legendary creature you play after you solve it, which requires you to have 15 cards in your graveyard. In addition to the new surveil cards, there are some reprints like Demir's Spybug, Enhanced Surveillance, Sir Conrad. The last one doesn't technically surveil, but it gets triggered every time you do, so it's pretty good in these decks. And since we're surveilling so much, we also get a lot of reanimation spells like Reanimate, Animate Dead, and Rise of the Dark Realms to get big things back from the graveyard in addition to your commander. Remember that your commander also reanimates constantly, right? So lots of ways to just get big stuff from the graveyard, and those big things include Doom Whisperer, which also surveils, Massacre Worm, which is a mini board wipe, and Grave Titan, which can put a bunch of tokens into play. So basically, surveil, reanimate, that's the idea. There's plenty more we don't have time to talk about. More surveil stuff, more graveyard synergies, more big creatures to reanimate, but generally if you like the idea of flipping your deck into your graveyard and working from there, be sure to check out Revenant Recon. Next on our list is Deadly Disguise with Coast Eyes of the Glade as the commander. It's a 2-mana 2/2 that says when a creature that is turned face up this turn deals combat damage to a player, you get to draw a card. You can also tap it to turn face down creatures face up. So yeah, this is a morph deck, or more accurately I guess a cloak deck. Cloak is basically just morph, the only difference being that creatures who are in disguise have ward, but fortunately the payoffs for morph don't actually say the word morph, they say face down and face up creatures, so disguise and morph perfectly synergize with each other. And you can see this with your backup commander, Descana the Rage Mother. When she enters, you will draw a card for each 2/2 you have, so that's going to be all your face down creatures, whether they're morphed or cloaked or disguised or whatever, doesn't matter. And whenever a 2/2 attacks, it's going to get +3/+3, so both of these are pretty solid payoffs for this strategy. Coust rewards you for flipping the creatures and gives you a way to flip them for free, and Descana rewards you for just keeping them face down. So we get lots of new face down payoffs like Veiled Ascension, Print Lifter Ooze, and Experiment 12. The first puts a flying counter on all face down creatures when you cast it, and then all future creatures that are played face down will also get those counters. You can also cloak the top of your library every turn, so that's a free 2/2 flyer at minimum. And if that card has morph or disguise, it can be flipped. The 2 creatures both have triggers when you turn creatures face up. The Ooze will make Ooze tokens, and the Experiment puts a +1/+1 counter on flipping creatures, or a number of them equal to its power. so just rewards for playing things face down then flipping them up. We also get True Identity and Panoptic Projector, both of which also trigger when things are turned face up. The first will scry 1 and draw once per turn, and the Projector will double triggered abilities that trigger when you flip things. The deck also has a lot of reprints like Trail of Mystery, Eudora Grave Gardener, and Whisperwood Elemental. The first gets a ton of lands when you play things face down. Eudora will return things to the battlefield face down as a land when they die, and the Elemental manifests the top of your library every turn, so that's another way to get free creatures every turn, just like with Veiled Ascension. There's also plenty of classic creatures with Morph, like Ash Cloud Phoenix, Hidden Dragon Slayer, and Enoch Survivalist. The first constantly comes back from the graveyard, and the other two are basically like removal spells, in addition to triggering all your other Morph stuff in the deck. There's plenty of more Morph creatures and face down payoffs in the deck, of course. I mean, there are a ton of creatures with Morph, and these are very relevant, by the way. We have some very, very big Morph things, and remember, an important aspect of this is your commander can flip them over for free. So some of these are kind of junk. They're so expensive and clunky, but the goal here is you pay 3 mana for them, then you flip them for free. But yeah, if all of this seems exciting for you, check out Deadly Disguise. I do think the deck offers some powerful new pieces for this strategy, which is relatively unexplored. We don't get Morph and face down stuff very often. Next up is Deep Clue Sea with Morska Undersea Sleuth as the commander. It's a 3 mana 2/3 that says you have no maximum hand size. It will investigate every turn for a clue token, and whenever you draw your second card each turn, such as when you sacrifice a clue token, it will get 2+1/+1 counters. So if you haven't figured it out yet, this is a clue deck. The alternate commander is Sophia Dogged Detective, a 4 mana 3/4 that creates a legendary 2/2 dog when it enters. Then you can sacrifice artifacts, such as clue tokens, to put a +1/+1 counter on all dogs, and whenever a dog deals combat damage to a player, you create a food and you investigate, which basically makes artifacts you can sacrifice to keep pumping up the dog. So anyway, we care about clues, and we have new clue cards like Armed with Proof, Detective of the Month, and Merchant of Truth. The first investigates twice, then turns all clues into equipment that can be equipped to give creatures +2/+0. The detective can make detectives, including itself, unblockable if you have the city's blessing, which is easier when you're making a pile of clue tokens. And it also makes 2/2 detectives, which will be unblockable when you draw your second card each turn, such as when you crack those clue tokens. And Merchant of Truth gives all clues exalted, meaning if you attack with one creature, it'll get +1/+1 for each clue you have. So yeah, I think what we see here is this deck is giving us a lot of offensive tools for this strategy, lots of ways to turn your clues into deadly threats. And that continues with Tangle Trove Kelp, Knowledge is Power, and On the Trail. The first will turn all your clues into 6/6 creatures, which is pretty scary, and do note that this creature has clue as its type. Knowledge is Power gives your creatures +X/+X, where X is the number of cards you've drawn this turn, so you can crack all your clues for cards and then make all your creatures huge. And do note that's an enchantment, not a spell. This isn't a one-time effect, it is an enchantment that's going to be pumping your creatures every turn. And On the Trail lets you play an extra land when you draw your second card, which will really allow you to accelerate. You crack clues to draw cards, which gives you more lands, which gives you more mana to make more clues and to crack them for more cards, and so on and so forth. In terms of reprints, you'll find highly played clue enablers like Tireless Tracker, Lonus, and Academy Manufactor. The first investigates when you play lands and gets counters when you crack clues. Lonus investigates whenever you play non-token creatures and will let you sacrifice clues to steal things from the top of your opponent's deck. And the Manufactor will increase the number of clues, food, and treasure you make, because if you make any one of them, you make all 3 instead. We also get things like Search the Premises, Ongoing Investigation, Adrix and Knave, which all also help with the clue strategy, like the first investigates if someone attacks you, the second one does if you attack others, and the creature will double the number of clue tokens you generate. So yeah, just lots of clues, man. So many clues. There's even indirect payoffs for generating clue tokens like Kappa Cannoneer, Shimmer Dragon, however this is pronounced. all of which get powered up when you make clue tokens, even if they don't create them directly. And yeah, as you might guess, there's tons of clue generators, there's tons of payoff, but basically, if you're looking for a new clue deck with a new clue commander, check out Deep Clue C. Our final deck is Blame Game, and this is a Boros Goad deck with Nelly Borka, Impulsive Accuser, as the commander. It's a 4-mana 2/4 with Vigilance that, when it attacks, will suspect a creature, then goad all suspects. So a suspected creature has menace and it can't block. So that means that not only does Nelly goad creatures, but she makes them difficult to block and unable to defend for the rest of the game. And keep in mind, she'll goad all those suspected creatures, so this really leaves players defenseless. It also says that whenever creatures deal damage to your opponents, you and the attacker draw a card, so that's further incentivizing your opponents to attack each other. The alternate commander is Feather, Radiant Arbiter, which is a 3-mana 4/3 with flying and lifelink that when targeted by a spell, you can pay 2 any number of times to copy it to other creatures. So it's not exactly what this deck is doing, but it's a pretty solid commander for an aggressive Boros spells deck. So we get some new Boros Goad cards like Redemption Arc, Immortal Obligation, and Havoc Eater. The first is an aura that goads a creature and makes it indestructible, which will allow you to wreak havoc on your opponents, and you can always exile it if necessary. Immortal Obligations will reanimate from the graveyard one of your opponent's creatures, which is a cool thing of you to do, but of course it will goad it to attack your opponents. And the Elemental will goad a creature, then it will get +1/+1 counters equal to the power of that creature. So not only can you goad something huge, but it'll make the creature huge as well. We also get some very crazy new cards for this archetype. Take the Bait and Hot Pursuit. These are kind of wild, I think, actually. Take the Bait can only be cast on your opponent's turn. It prevents all combat damage you and your planeswalkers will take, so it's a fog. It's a Boros Fog. It then untaps all the attacking creatures and goads them. So basically, if someone sends all their creatures at you, you just fog it, untap the creatures, and send them somewhere else, which is kind of funny. Hot Pursuit will suspect and goad a creature, but at the beginning of combat on your turn, if 2 or more players have lost the game, you gain control of all goaded and suspected creatures until end of turn. So this solves a major issue with this archetype. The problem that goad decks can have is that you goad your opponents into eliminating each other, but then what happens when it's down to the final 2? You can't goad the last player. So what this does is after you've been goading and suspecting things all game, once you get down to the final 2, you just take all their creatures and kill them. So yeah, that's that problem solved. I don't know if we solved the mystery, but we definitely solved that problem. As far as reprints go, there are lots of staples for this archetype, like Vengeful Ancestor, Agitator Ant, and Disrupt Decorum. The first goads something when it enters and when it attacks, and then deals damage to people when they attack with those creatures. The Ant encourages players to goad their own creatures by offering +1/+1 counters, and the spell just goads everything. Just goad it all, it's fine. So since players tend to want to attack you with creatures that aren't goaded, right? If you're goading half the table, people have a tendency to attack you with the other half. So there's lots of discouragement with things like Brash Taunter and Boros Reckoner, each of which will deal damage back to people when they take damage. Or there's Kazul and Darien, both of which generate creature tokens when you're attacked. Kazul makes 3/3s unless the attacker pays mana, and Darien makes 1/1s whenever you're dealt damage. Or you can just discourage attacks altogether with things like Windborn Muse and Ghostly Prison, which forces players to pay mana to attack you in the first place. And naturally, there are plenty of cards that goad. There's stuff that suspects or has disguise. There's more ways to force your opponents to tear each other apart. And if all of that sounds fun, be sure to check out Blame Game. And that's it for the Karlov Manor Commander decks. Be sure to let me know which deck you're most interested in. I will leave links to the complete deck list in the description below, as well as sponsored Amazon links, which I always discourage you from using if you have a local game store. But in the meantime, thanks for watching. I hope this video was useful, and I will see you in the next one.